Lovely to meet you, Rami. I've seen the film and I was absolutely blown away. I was saying to the other guys that they'd mentioned about how they're aware lots of fanatics are watching it with quite detailed knowledge of Queen, and just to warn you, I'm that guy.
Oh,
so
shit.
I'm not going to quiz you about correct moustache timelines.
I will say this, I mean, just for the sake of making a 2-hour film, you have to take liberties with the chronology of their story to give the most impact. I mean, we're not making a documentary. You can go and watch a documentary, but we just had to give you the best 2 hours we possibly could, and it meant shuffling a few things around.
Well, it would have looked quite weird if every scene you'd had a different haircut. It would have looked quite wiggy.
Good point.
Well,
Thank you.
It would have seemed like it was an exercise in makeup and costume, which, although the makeup and costume is great, it's not about that.
This is great. Keep going.
I wondered how you'd found it suddenly entering into this sort of world of fanaticism and obsessive fans, in a way that perhaps with Mr. Robot, that was your project from the start. That didn't exist before you did, whereas you're coming into the Queen world sort of 50 years late.
Right.
Is it quite intimidating?
It is. I mean, with Elliot, it was intimidating in a way because you think about everyone who deals with social anxiety and how their brain chemistry works. So there's a duty to honor that as well. I mean, you're reaching a lot of people who connect with that human being. So in a different respect, obviously, people know Freddie Mercury for being arguably the greatest frontman of all time, and trying to fill the shoes and fill the expectations of people's perception of who their hero is quite daunting, yes, but it's an opportunity of a lifetime, and I thought the only way I could do it is if I had enough time to prepare for it. If you gave me 2 months to do this, I would have said hell no, but I had almost a year, and I thought if I am diligent enough, and if I just focus and concentrate and almost become possessed by the human being, it might actually work out.
And before you take on a project like this, do you sort of have to ask yourself, do you want to be telling people what your favourite Queen song is for the next couple of years? Do you sort of have to go, okay, I'm gonna dive into this world?
Yeah, I just tried not to think about anything after it. It was daunting enough thinking about being there on the day on a Live Aid stage set, or giving people an opportunity to see how Bohemian Rhapsody, the song, was conceived, or how we come up with We Will Rock You. Those moments were so contained because it focused me to be present. He's so present, Freddie Mercury. Everything he did was in the moment. It was spontaneous. It was, for the love of life. He had a zest for life, a zest for authenticity, and being the best you could possibly be in every moment. And I tried to do that in the moment every day without thinking about what was going to happen 2 or 3 years down the line. And to be quite honest, I haven't thought about it since.
One thing that really struck me about your performance and the other band members was not just the stuff that's familiar to everyone. So obviously with Freddie, you've got lots of iconic moves and poses that everyone knows, and it would have been quite easy to sort of do a tribute act of that. But each of you, and I think you especially, but there were small, tiny little details in this huge, larger than life character which you nailed, and then it doesn't feel like you're watching someone doing an impression of someone. And I wondered what was your way into those smaller parts of Freddie?
I think from the very beginning I just told myself, look, you're never going to be Freddie Mercury. There's only one Freddie Mercury, so just throw that idea out the window. Now, secondly, don't imitate him. Don't impersonate him. Learn as much as you possibly can. But what you have to do is inhabit him in a way, capture some essence of him. It's going to be essentially a version of him, and it's my version. It's what I collectively put together by studying him in the greatest detail I could have ever put together. It was countless hours of archival footage, listening to every radio interview he did, trying to hear how he interacts with waiters, hospitality, how he talks to his mom, how he talks to his sister, how Brian would talk about him in interviews, how Roger would talk about him, and just compiling all of this to capture some semblance of a human being, and then working on his voice. I mean, there were days when I thought I could nail his voice exactly, but it wouldn't necessarily translate the way I wanted to sometimes on screen, and I thought, well, perhaps that's a good thing, because you don't necessarily want it to be so spot on that it feels like an impersonation. So I gave myself the liberty to kind of just let it live, go out there and have the experience as moment to moment and spontaneously as I could. There was nothing about the man that was choreographed. So I never wanted to look at things and say, I'm gonna do that other than Live Aid. We had to do that move for move, but I would watch him and watch his inspirations, Liza Minnelli and Bowie and Hendrix, and try to see where he came up with this style, this elegance, this grace. He loved ballet, he loved opera, so I started doing all of those things just to capture some of what I thought he was and bring that to the table every day.
Because I guess also it's not just about, like some people might try and get the voice, but his voice is different in different situations. So sometimes he's very sort of camp and jokey and catty, and then sometimes he's very reserved and shy, and then sometimes he's very sort of powerful and full on.
Yeah.
And how did you find sort of moving from those different parts of the same person?
I found it astonishing when I was watching him. For the first few times I saw him, I said, whoa, this man has multiple personalities. But it wasn't that at all. He knew how to maneuver his way through life the way he wanted to. So if he wanted to be straightforward to you, he'd sit forward and he'd tell you exactly how it fucking was, right? And then if he wanted to be elegant, he'd sit back, and sometimes he could be quite demure and pull a piece of thread from a chair and be quite coy. And I just found him to be the ultimate chameleon, but I never looked at it as these are 10 different human beings. I said, wow, there's one Freddie who can be anybody who he wants to be at any given time. And that was something I thought about from scene to scene. If there was a moment where I really did want to be aggressive or get my point across, my voice would drop a little bit the way his would. And if there was a moment perhaps with Mary Austin or Jim Hutton, perhaps I could allow my voice to be a little bit more vulnerable.
What were Queen to you before this project ever came up, before you ever heard of it? Did they have any sort of part in your life, or was this a job?
For everyone who hears Bohemian Rhapsody for the first time, they remember it. I mean, there's nothing, I think, quite like that song, and it is at once very emotional, sometimes haunting, very whimsical, operatic, of course. And so when you listen to it, I had this sense of, wow, music is so much more than I ever thought it could be. And so hearing that song, it made me think about art in that way, that there was no limit or a parameter to what we could do creatively. And I think that was a very powerful lesson to learn as a young person.
There's a real thrill in, that I think only real fans know of when you see someone who obviously cares as much as you do about small things. So, you know, like you said, the fact that Freddie might pick a thread out of a chair, or he might tell someone to fuck off. Mm-hmm. And I got that thrill watching you play him. So I hope that you're aware amongst all of this cavalcade of stuff that people really appreciate the time you took and the effort you took to tell that story. It's not really a question.
No, well, I appreciate it, and I know how much he means to everybody, and you just don't want to let anybody down, but most of all, I don't want to let him down, and he means so much to me now. I'm literally in love with the human being, and I feel like I'm somewhat connected to him in a spiritual way, and you know, that may sound as it may in any way, perhaps, but that's how he exists to me, and I just wanted to do him justice and honor him, and in order to in any way come close to achieving his essence or embodying that supernatural creature was to just give it everything I possibly had. So I appreciate it, and I hope fans appreciate it as much as you do.
Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much.
Lovely to meet you.
Pleasure.
Radio.